Hello, everyone, and welcome to our post-graduation work permit information session for international graduate students at SFU. My name is Karen Lockyer, and I am an international student advisor here at SFU. I'm so happy to be joined today by my colleague, Sophia Lambos. Sophia is also an international student advisor at SFU, and she has very kindly offered to moderate our discussion today. Given the current context here in Canada, it is more important than ever to acknowledge the land that we are on. As visitors on this land, we have an important responsibility to acknowledge the unceded grounds on which we are all so privileged to gather in the pursuit of higher education. I would thus like to begin by acknowledging the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kikite, Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, and Tsawwassen peoples on whose traditional territories our 3 SFU campuses reside. Here you will see a brief outline of the topics that we will go through today in our presentation. I will begin with a short introduction of the International Services for Students, or ISS office, where we have the honor and the privilege of working to support SFU students from international pathways. I will then move on to speak about the post-graduation work permit eligibility criteria and application process. We will discuss work eligibility as a student and during the transition to the post-graduation work permit, and then highlight several COVID-19 related policy impacts that you may want to consider as you approach the post-graduation work permit. We'll then take the rest of our time today to address questions from you. The session today will go until 3 p.m. Pacific time. Due to the evolving nature of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have witnessed many changes taking place very rapidly. Thus, the information I will be sharing with you today may change, and it may also be changing as we speak. The information we share today is current to the best of my knowledge as of today's date, which for those of you watching the recording is September the 22nd, 2021. At ISS, we offer a wide range of services to help support your transition to SFU as an international student. You can see a list of all the services and supports we provide to our students on this slide. At ISS, we provide non-academic advising, which includes advising and information about your temporary immigration status in Canada, like your study permit, your work eligibility, the post-graduation work permit, and also medical insurance in Canada. Our 5 international student advisors and immigration specialists are all regulated Canadian immigration consultants and are licensed to provide advice on your study permit, visa, on and off campus work regulations, post-graduation work permit, and more. In addition, our team at ISS can offer advice on medical insurance and navigating the Canadian healthcare system. As you'll see here, there are various options for you to connect with an international student advisor, and this includes both in-person and virtual options, such as live chat, Zoom appointments, in-person appointments, email, and telephone. We understand that this is a very difficult time, and many students are not able to travel to Canada. We also understand that different students may have different comfort levels with accessing in-person services like advising. I want you to know that we are here for you, and we want you to feel safe and comfortable. We will continue to offer both virtual services and in-person services so that we can best support you. Another great resource, and probably the first one I would encourage you to access when you have questions, is our website. This is where you can find answers to your most common questions. The website includes instruction guides on how to apply for or extend your immigration documents. And as an example, we actually have 2 step-by-step instruction guides here dedicated to the post-graduation work permit application in Canada. Our website also has information on medical insurance, enrollment requirements for international students, work eligibility, and more. These are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we always recommend these self-guided resources as a first step to get your questions answered. So that's us and what we do in a nutshell. Let's move on now to the post-graduation work permit. Full-time international students may be eligible to apply for a post-graduation work permit upon completion of their studies in Canada. The post-graduation work permit is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, meaning that you can only be issued a post-graduation work permit once. It is an open work permit of up to 3 years in duration, and you don't need a job offer or work experience to apply. In the advanced questions, many students asked, when is the best time to apply for a post-graduation work permit? Which is a great question. Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, or IRCC, states that students must apply for the post-graduation work permit within 180 days of completing their program of study. We recommend that you begin counting the 180-day period from the day your thesis grade is made available in Go SFU, if your program includes a thesis, or the final grade deadline of your final term of study for non-thesis programs. It is important to note here that the date of your convocation ceremony has no relation to the 180-day application period for your post-graduation work permit. To be eligible for a post-graduation work permit, you must complete a study program at a designated learning institution like SFU that was at least 8 months long and that led to a degree, diploma, or certificate. You must have also maintained full-time student status in Canada during each semester of your study program, with possible exceptions being made during a period of authorized leave or in a student's final term of study. If you would like to review the full-time definition at SFU for immigration purposes, you can find this on our website. For graduate SFU students, full-time enrollment or study in the spring, summer, and fall terms is required. You can also review the full eligibility criteria under the post-graduation work permit program by visiting the IRCC website. In most cases, you must apply online for a post-graduation work permit, and this can be done directly on the IRCC website. The post-graduation work permit costs $255. If biometrics are required, this will cost an additional $85. Processing times will vary depending on visa office location and are available on the IRCC website at this link appearing at the bottom of the slide. Processing times do fluctuate throughout the year, so it's a good idea to bookmark this website so that you can stay up to date on the most recent estimated processing times as it gets closer to your making an application. Here we have listed some basic requirements when it comes to an in-Canada post-graduation work permit application. You can also find this information in more detail in our post-graduation work permit instruction guides on our website. This is not an exhaustive list of requirements, and you may want to include additional documents specific to your case in your post-graduation work permit application. Outside Canada post-graduation work permit applicants will likely notice some differences in requirements, both in regard to the required forms and the supporting documents. We recommend that outside Canada postgrad work permit applicants consult with the country-specific visa office instructions for the responsible visa office to confirm requirements. These can be found on the IRCC website, and you can also reach out to us directly should you have any questions about this. You will need to include proof of program completion at SFU, so either your credential completion letter or your Senate letter, and a final transcript in both an in Canada and outside Canada post-graduation work permit application. When you transition to the post-graduation work permit, your spouse or common law partner may be eligible to apply for an open work permit as well. If you are employed in a skilled occupation and you have a work permit that is valid for at least 6 months. A skilled occupation would be one that falls within the National Occupational Classification, or NOC, categories 0, A, or B. You must also physically reside in Canada or plan to physically reside in Canada while working. If your spouse or common law partner would like to apply for this open work permit, they would need to include both evidence of your relationship and evidence of your skilled employment in their work permit application, in addition to all other required forms and supporting documents. You and your spouse or partner are welcome to connect with us directly if you have any questions about this option. The post-graduation work permit is issued based on the official length of the program of study completed to a maximum of 3 years. As you will see here, study programs must be a minimum of 8 months in duration in order to be eligible. If you complete a program of study that is between 8 months and 2 years in duration, IRCC may issue a post-graduation work permit that's valid for up to the same length as your study program. As an example, if you complete a 1-year study program, then you may be eligible for a 1-year post-graduation work permit. I'm so sorry, can I please ask everyone to mute their microphones? I'm hearing some sound here in the background. Thank you so much. If the official length of the program of study that you complete is 2 years or more, then a 3-year post-graduation work permit may be issued. I do want to emphasize here that IRCC makes the final determination with regards to the duration of post-graduation work permit that is issued. So we as international student advisors are not able to confirm or guarantee the duration of post-graduation work permit that you may be eligible for. IRCC also has language in their program delivery instructions, or PDIs, about programs of study with a duration of 16 to 23 months in relation to post-graduation work permit validity, which I will share with you in the next slide. So from IRCC's PDIs, we see officers may issue 3-year post-graduation work permits to individuals who complete a master's or doctoral degree in Canada when the eligible DLI has confirmed in the written confirmation of program completion that the degree is 16 to 23 months in length and does not include regularly scheduled breaks. I wanted to mention this section of the PDI specifically, as I know that we have several graduate programs of study at SFU that may fall under this category given their duration. Again, I do want to state that the IRCC visa officer processing the application will make the final determination with regards to eligibility considerations and validity of the work permit issued. You can apply for a post-graduation work permit from inside Canada as long as you're eligible to do so. You must apply for a post-graduation work permit within 180 days of completing your program of study at SFU. For an in-Canada post-grad work permit application, your study permit must have been valid at some point during these 180 days. Under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations, your study permit will become invalid 90 days after you have completed your program of study, or on the expiry date printed on the permit, whichever comes first. It is important to be mindful of this if you are completing your study program at SFU and applying for your post-graduation work permit in Canada. If you will be applying for a post-grad work permit from inside Canada, it is important that you hold valid immigration status at the time you submit your application. If you are in a situation where you are in Canada and your study permit will expire or become invalid before you can submit your post-grad work permit application, you have a few options. If you are still within your final term of study, you can submit an application to extend your study permit within Canada for an additional 90 days. This is otherwise known as a bridging extension of your study permit. This would then give you sufficient time to finish your studies and obtain the necessary paperwork from SFU that you need to apply for the work permit. In this case, you may receive the necessary documents from SFU to apply for the postgrad work permit before your study permit extension is approved, but after your current study permit has expired. In this situation, you would still be allowed to apply for the postgrad work permit from within Canada, as you would hold maintained status, formerly known as implied status, until IRCC has made a final decision on your study permit application. Finally, if your study permit is expiring after you finish your studies, but before you will be able to apply for the postgrad work permit, you could also apply to change your status to that of a visitor in order to remain in Canada longer. To do so, you would apply online before your study permit expires or becomes invalid. In this scenario, you could remain in Canada and submit your postgrad work permit application while holding maintained status. It is also possible for you to apply for a postgrad work permit from outside Canada. And at this time, we actually do have many of our students who are pursuing this option. If you are completing your studies from outside of Canada, you can apply for a postgrad work permit from where you are, as long as you're eligible for the work permit and you've been approved for a study permit. You don't have to have held a valid study permit at any point during your online studies from outside Canada, but you must submit your postgrad work permit application within 180 days of completing your program. In this case, if you meet the eligibility criteria, you can apply for a postgrad work permit if you were enrolled in a program that was in progress in March 2020, or you started a program between spring 2020 and fall 2021, and you either have a study permit, or you've been approved for a study permit, or you applied for a study permit before starting your studies. But in this case, your study permit must eventually be approved. So I thought I would just briefly go through a simplified application timeline for the postgrad work permit and how things would look. First of all, you would complete the requirements for your program of study at SFU. Secondly, you would obtain official notification from SFU that you have completed your studies. And as I mentioned before, that would either be in the form of a credential completion letter, which will come to you first, or a Senate letter, which will come to you a bit later. You could then request a final transcript from SFU. And for the purposes of a postgrad work permit application, the IRCC PDIs indicate that an official or an unofficial transcript should be sufficient. Once you have all those documents you need, you then submit your post-graduation work permit application within 180 days of completing your program. If you apply in Canada for the work permit, the post-graduation work permit will be mailed to your Canadian address once your application is approved. If you apply for the post-graduation work permit from outside of Canada, you will receive a port of entry introduction letter from IRCC once your application is approved, and then you would receive the post-graduation work permit upon entering Canada. I'm going to move along now to work eligibility, with the main focus here being, of course, work eligibility during the transition to the post-graduation work permit. As immigration rules and policies do not exist in a vacuum, and because these policies often interact with one another, I'm going to begin by going through the work eligibility requirements for students at SFU, which include the most common types of work that our students engage in: on-campus work, off-campus work, and work that is an essential component of their study program, or co-op work. And then we will move into work eligibility during the transition to the post-graduation work permit. To work on campus while you study under your study permit, you must be enrolled full-time at SFU in the term that you wish to work. As I mentioned earlier, you can review SFU's definition of full-time for immigration purposes for graduate students on our website. In addition to being enrolled full-time, you must also have a valid study permit. And that study permit must include a condition printed on the document stating that you may work or that you may accept employment. When we're looking at on-campus work, IRCC defines on-campus work as employment facilities within the boundaries of the campus. To work off campus, you must, under your study permit, you must again be enrolled full-time at SFU in the term you would like to work and have a valid study permit, which includes the appropriate conditions. You must also be pursuing a degree, diploma, or certificate program at a designated learning institution like SFU that is at least 6 months in duration. Off-campus work under your study permit is restricted to up to 20 hours per week during regular academic sessions and full-time during a regularly scheduled break, if eligible. You will see here that for both on-campus work and off-campus work, providing you meet the eligibility criteria, then you would not actually require a work permit to pursue these types of work. You would do it under your study permit. Many SFU students are also pursuing a program of study that has a mandatory internship, practicum, or co-op component that is built into the curriculum and required to graduate. For this type of work, students require a co-op work permit in addition to their study permit. Students enrolled in a full-time co-op, internship, or practicum at SFU pursue that type of work under their co-op work permit, and they often work full-time hours as deemed by their employer, meaning that their work hours are not restricted to 20 hours per week under their co-op work permit. Note that for all of these types of work, you must also have a valid social insurance number or SIN number so that you can be paid. Moving along to work during the transition to the post-graduation work permit, if you are eligible to work off campus under your study permit in your final term of study, then you may continue to work up to 20 hours per week until you receive official notification of program completion from SFU. And this is in the form of a credential completion letter issued to you via Go SFU. Once you receive official notification of program completion from the university, you must stop working under your study permit as you no longer meet the requirements to work under your study permit. If you are pursuing an SFU co-op term in your final term of study, you must cease working under your co-op work permit once you have fulfilled the co-op requirement for your program. However, then once official notification of program completion is issued by SFU, you can then apply for the post-graduation work permit. And if you meet the eligibility criteria, which you see listed here on my screen, you can actually begin working full-time immediately after submitting your post-grad work permit application under R186W of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations. Because many SFU graduate programs issue completion letters to students quite shortly after they have completed their program requirements, students may actually be able to apply for the post-grad work permit and begin full-time work, if eligible, quite soon after finishing their studies at SFU. We spoke earlier a bit about how it would be possible to apply for a post-grad work permit while on maintained status, or while holding visitor status here in Canada. I wanted to mention this piece again within the context of working, since you will note here that one of the eligibility criteria you would need to meet in order to begin working full-time immediately after submitting a post-grad work permit application is that you would need to hold a valid study permit at the time of the application. Therefore, if you were to apply for the post-grad work permit while under maintained status or while holding visitor status, it is our understanding that you would unfortunately not be eligible to begin working until you have obtained your post-grad work permit. Given the impact of COVID-19 on international students, IRCC has announced temporary policy changes to post-graduation work permit eligibility requirements for students that have been enrolled in post-graduation work permit eligible programs already in progress in March 2020, and students who began post-graduation work permit eligible programs between spring 2020 and fall 2021. According to the IRCC website, students in these groups are not required to complete 50% of their program or programs of study in Canada. Up to 100% of their program can be completed online from outside of Canada. Additionally, time spent studying outside of Canada can be counted towards the overall length of the post-graduation work permit until December the 31st, 2021. And it is our current understanding that any time spent studying outside of Canada after December 31st, 2021 would then be deducted from the overall length of the post-graduation work permit. So this temporary policy would apply to students, like I said, who were enrolled in a program that was in progress in March 2020, or who started a program between spring 2020 and fall 2021, and either hold a valid study permit, have been approved for a study permit, or applied for a study permit before starting their studies, providing that that application is eventually approved. If you started your online studies outside of Canada before you applied for a study permit, you may still be eligible for a post-graduation work permit. However, it's our understanding that only the time you spent studying online after your application was received by our IRCC would count towards the length of the post-grad work permit. Moving on to leave, authorized leave from study. The pandemic has definitely created unique challenges for many students. And for a lot of different reasons, students have had to take time off from their studies during this troubling period. Under the post-graduation work permit program, students are required to maintain full-time student status during each semester of their studies. And again, with possible exceptions being made during a period of authorized leave or in a student's final term of study, like I mentioned before. As we also touched on earlier, for SFU graduate students, this means that full-time study is required in each spring, summer, and fall term in order to maintain eligibility for the post-grad work permit. IRCC announced some flexibility in cases where students were forced to drop to part-time enrollment or take a term off for reasons related to COVID-19 for the spring 2020 and summer 2020 terms. However, this flexibility has not been extended beyond summer 2020. Given this, it is our understanding that the expectation is that students continue to maintain full-time student status if they wish to remain eligible for a post-graduation work permit. What this also means is that studying on a part-time basis or taking a term off may impact eligibility for a post-grad work permit. If you have had previous study terms during which you were not able to study full-time, please feel very welcome to contact us directly for case-specific advice on how to address time off from study or periods of part-time study within the context of a post-graduation work permit application. We work on a lot of these types of cases, and we would be really happy to guide you further if you had some questions about that. Moving on to biometrics. If you are required to give biometrics as part of your post-graduation work permit application, so this would mean that you have not given biometrics as part of an application to come to Canada in the last 10 years, then currently, under the current policy, you would be exempt from the requirement to give biometrics if you are applying for the post-grad work permit from within Canada. This is a temporary measure. So we do advise, like with all the temporary policies and temporary measures, that you stay up to date on any changes by monitoring the Government of Canada website or by reaching out to us if you have questions. We also try to post updates like this in our COVID-19 frequently asked questions website for international students, which is also built into our website. It's important to note that this temporary measure does not apply if you are outside of Canada and submitting a post-graduation work permit application from outside of Canada. Another impact that we've seen resulting from the pandemic is that we now have students who are starting and completing their studies from outside of Canada. Students who graduate from outside of Canada and meet the eligibility requirements of the temporary post-graduation work permit policy changes do not need to hold or have held a valid study permit within 180 days of applying for the post-grad work permit. In order to be eligible to apply, these graduates must either have a study permit or have received a study permit application approval, and they must still apply for the work permit within 180 days of receiving written notification of program completion from their designated learning institution, and of course, meet the eligibility requirements under the post-grad work permit program. Students graduating in Canada, though, are still required to apply for the post-grad work permit within 180 days of holding a valid study permit and within 180 days of receiving written notification of program completion. And finally, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to impact travel to Canada, as I'm sure you're aware. And for this reason, it is important that if you are planning to travel outside of Canada, or if you are planning to travel to Canada, that you meet the eligibility criteria to travel to Canada that are in place at that time. And the eligibility criteria to travel to Canada have been evolving and changing as the pandemic evolves and changes. So again, we do strongly advise staying up to date with the information on the Government of Canada website, and also connecting with us directly through an appointment, email, phone, live chat, if you'd like to get the most recent information available. So thank you all so much for your patience going through all this information. I realized that it was an awful lot to digest, and I appreciate you sticking around with me today to hear all of this. We are going to shortly move on to our question and answer session. So I'm going to end the recording in a moment. So for those of you who are watching the recording on our website, thank you so much for watching, and we hope to see you in a future workshop or in one-on-one advising.